Have you noticed that American industry is increasingly taking advantage of its own citizens? You may be making the mistake of thinking that this is an American problem. From trying to pass bills to employ 14-year-old children to work in meat packing plants, to railway workers being worked to the bone, stopping them from getting paid sick leave during a pandemic, while the rail companies, funnily enough, rake in record profits. The president literally stopped those workers from their freedom to strike. Just need to cut in here. As I was editing this video, a train in Ohio has derailed carrying vast amounts of the toxic chemical vinyl chloride used in the manufacture of things like PVC. They set it ablaze in a controlled burn, releasing a toxic chemical into the atmosphere.
Is this normal? No, it's not.
Oh, that's just mild conjunctivitis. It's a standard reaction.
Styrofoam burning, yeah. Come on, man. Look at that cloud. That ain't normal.
No, it's not.
But that's not the main point. The train would have been far less likely to derail if the rail company had not cut costs on maintenance and staff expenses to maximize its profits, and that is exactly what the rail union were concerned about.
So I met Clyde in East Palestine to ask him about it.
It looks like a faulty bearing caused a catastrophic derailment. These railroads are turning profits hand over fist. They've cut their workforce to bare bones, and now they're paying the price for it because the wheels are falling off the train, basically.
Poorly managed rail lines, exhausted workers, stretched too thin was a recipe for disaster. And also the rail company can continue to post record profits. But that's actually a great example of why liberalism is not on the side of the workers. And in the greater scheme of things, it helps explain the fact that we see it all over the world, because liberalism is the progressive facade of capitalism. And as you will see, liberals and conservatives are working to grind down workers for the profitability and growth of the capitalist system. So what is inherent in the capitalist model? Well, most important for this video, growth and profits. Capitalism demands that companies seek higher profit year on year, no matter what. And over the last few years, we've seen those record profits. But we have to understand something about profits. Profits are made by underpaying workers for their labor. So that means that workers have been worked harder and underpaid for it year on year. Now, in the few years, you may have also noticed a lot of discourse around burnout, quiet quitting, laziness, and depression. And the thing is that all of these are signs that workers are being worked to their physical and mental limits. They are manifesting differently in different places. Like, for example, in China, we have the lay-flat generation. Quiet quitters, we often talk about in English-speaking countries. Calls for work-life balance that I heard when I was living in Korea and Japan. So yeah, these are really signs of the oppression reaching its human limits. So, okay, we have seen record profits, record unpaid labor. And while some people may say that populations are contracting due to lower birth rates, actually, thanks to technology developed by workers, we are far more efficient than previous generations. Since most workers achieve twice as much productivity than their parents' generation, we would need to lose half the population on Earth for this to actually make a difference. In reality, the reason we are being pushed to work harder is because more and more money is being extracted from our economy by the capitalist class. And media works to enable that by controlling the discourse, which places responsibility on workers. From there, capitalist governments, liberal or conservative, find ways to legislate wage slave abuse. And at this rate, we can probably expect little Timmy to be back down in the coal mines with his canary, a few tea candles, and a severe case of black lung. So how does the capitalist class or capitalist government continue to take advantage of workers when we are reaching the limits of what is humanly possible? Well, that's where we can see the only place that capitalism actually innovates. And that is by being absolutely gross and dehumanizing. In the US, we are seeing a push to return to child labor. Now that's because they've already destroyed the idea of retirement, which is why those feel-good stories of 80 to 90-year-old Walmart greeters getting a $4 cake for 10 years of service are so prevalent on the internet. These stories should be considered dystopian, but instead, the modern capitalist discourse has made them into something to be proud of. We've been tricked into thinking this is something wholesome, but in actuality, it's our entire lives being stolen from us. Now, not every country has mined their citizens to this extent, yet. They have that option, and that's exactly what we're seeing. In France, they are pushing for retirement to be pushed back 2 years. Now, this slow crumbling of the social contract forces workers to labor 2 more years when they are already far more efficient than previous generations. So that means they aren't doing another 2 years of labor, they're doing another 4 years of labor, and they are being robbed of their lives. The UK is seeing incredible inflation, which they are putting on the working class, when again, their work is the only thing keeping the country alive. It isn't the CEO in any company that is maintaining the economic health of the nation. Korea has been working 52 hours a week, which was a reduction from previous work hours. But during his campaign, the current president once brought up the idea of a 120-hour work week, just to float the idea. That 52-hour work week maximum is set to take effect soon for small businesses, and already Yoon is working to roll it back. Many Japanese workers haven't seen a raise in 30 years. This means that they work harder for the same pay, as that constant need for growth and profitability forces all to compete against each other, or their workplace risks going bankrupt. So again, the US returns to working kids and denying sick leave, showing that they are really in the final stage of capitalism or return to straight slavery. France's government is working to slowly remove their citizens' retirements. And you might say, well, they have a really low retirement age compared to other countries anyway. Yes, they may be one of the latest in this process, and you may be jealous of that, but this is a case of class antagonism. Instead of saying, maybe we deserve to retire earlier, you say, maybe they should be enslaved as hard as us. This is like when older Americans got angry about the possibility of young people having their college loans forgiven. Instead of saying they should suffer like I did, we should say they shouldn't and we shouldn't have suffered. The UK government is driving people to live in worse and worse conditions to harm their bargaining ability. If strikes aren't successful, they risk having more and more of their rights and freedoms stripped from them. And again, you can blame them for leaving the European market, but that was sold to them as a huge propaganda campaign which manufactured their consent. Korea's president floated the idea of repealing workers' protections. Again, we can consider one of those videos of workers on an oil rig saying we should all toughen up because they work 80 hours a week. But they don't realize that they are like turkeys voting for Christmas.
Grind, mad grind. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nothing but grind. I'm on the grind. My house, this ain't a normal house, it's a grind house.
Oil rig workers voting for their own abuse. Sure, 80-hour work weeks now, but as we learned, once you set a standard, capitalism has to expand on it or it cannot achieve its main goal, growth and profitability. And what was our definition for profit? And the last example, Japan has been frozen in time for 30 years. And that means that they have been putting off capitalism's growth imperative for those 30 years. And now they are in a 30-year disadvantage as this recession sets in and demands that they reckon with it. They can no longer be driven when the veil of capitalism is finally lifted. And you may have heard of this veil as meritocracy, hard work gets results, the American dream, whatever it is. They are all the illusion that we are temporarily embarrassed billionaires and we just need to work hard to get there. We have all been subsisting purely on the ideology of hard work and for nothing but the sake of hard work. Grind culture, the gig economy, wake and grind BS, whatever it is. They've been doing this for generations, and now it has become a part of our culture. This is not a Japanese-only phenomena. This is a global capitalist phenomena, and we need to understand that so that we can stop externalizing it onto other people. So again, this is happening everywhere in the world, and there is a clear problem. Capitalism's foundations on the idea of infinite human resources in a finite world, and its other historical foundation on colonialism, slavery, and hierarchical subjugation in the past through force, but now through money, means that it works to mine us for everything we have. And it's time that we fought back. A quick reminder to avoid the pitfalls of class antagonism. Today we briefly spoke about nationalism as a form of class antagonism. When you see people doing better or worse than you, and you classify them through a system that benefits all of our oppression, you are benefiting the capitalist class, of course, and harming yourself. So for the sake of worker solidarity across the world, we need to push away those knee-jerk reactions which have been baked into our discourse. I'll leave you with these words from Richard Wolff.
American slavery. You might divide the people who found slavery awful into two groups. One group was horrified by how slaves were treated, how they were fed, clothed, their families broken up, beaten, all of that. And they devoted themselves to a struggle to improve the condition of the slaves. Better diets, better clothing, keep their families together. And then there was a second group of people who were horrified not only by slavery, but by the first group of those who opposed it. They looked at their brothers and sisters in that other movement, and they said, you're missing the most powerful and basic moral issue of the time. The problem is not how we treat the slaves. The problem is that there are such a thing as slaves. The further argument they made was, even if you and we struggle to improve the diet, the clothing, the housing, and so on of slaves, as long as they remain slaves, whatever we win can and probably will be taken away by the master in the future, just as it was taken away by the master in the past. Which is why the solution is not improving their situation, but transforming it into something utterly different. Now move forward with me to our present system, which isn't slavery, it's capitalism. Oh yes, we could complain a little bit that wages should be a bit higher, that people shouldn't be thrown out of their homes by foreclosure. This should sound familiar to you. We were worrying, and we still worry about the conditions of the working people of America, like we might have been upset about the conditions of the slaves back in the Old South. But then there has to be a moral voice coming up and saying, the issue isn't whether workers' wages should be higher, their job conditions better, their security of work higher. There's a deeper and more profound moral problem. And that's the problem of the capitalist system. That there's a moral question about whether human beings who collectively and cooperatively produce the wealth of a society are unable to participate in the decisions as to what is done with what they have produced.
Wow. If you enjoyed today's video, consider supporting me on Patreon. Regardless, I'd love to hear your comments. You can always like and subscribe. Thanks.